Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take your sources and unpack the most important insights.
And today, we're diving into some really interesting material you shared. It's based on a discussion with Muki Tenenbaum and Claudio Suchovicki, focusing on, well, the elephant in the room, artificial intelligence.
Yeah, it's everywhere. Our mission here is to cut through some of that hype and really focus on Tenenbaum's perspective. How is AI fundamentally changing the rules? For entrepreneurs, for investors, maybe for all of us.
He definitely paints a picture of some major shifts, things you might want to consider for, future plans.
Okay, let's get into it. Let's unpack this.
So before this current AI wave really hit, Tenenbaum sketches out the traditional tech startup scene. There was a pretty standard playbook, right?
Right. You'd build a startup, you'd pour everything into it, but the big dream often wasn't like building the next forever company from day one. It was about getting noticed.
Getting on the radar of the big guys.
Exactly. You wanted to be valuable enough, maybe innovative enough.
Yeah.
Basically good enough to be bought by a Google, a Facebook, a Microsoft.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And Tenenbaum points out this wasn't just a quick .com thing. It lasted. It was the model for quite a while. Startups created value in two main ways.
Okay.
One was intellectual property. Unique codes, special algorithms, maybe a patent. The other, and this was key, was talent, the people.
The team.
Yeah. He mentions Microsoft buying Skype. Part of that huge price tag wasn't just the software, it was the brains behind it. He talks about valuing, I think the quote was, 2 geniuses and 10 elite programmers. That expertise was a massive asset.
That makes sense. If you're a big company and need some cutting-edge tech or a super specialized team, buying a startup that already cracked it, well, that's often way faster than building it yourself.
Precisely. You're buying innovation, you're buying talent ready to go. That was the path. Acquisition, or for the lucky few, maybe an IPO.
But Tenenbaum's big point, the core of his argument, is that this whole system, it's breaking down. Now,
because of AI.
That's exactly it. He sees AI as this disruptive force taking apart that old structure. And he gives 2 big reasons why. The first one, functionality replication. Replication, meaning if my little startup makes a cool AI tool, a giant like Google can just copy it.
Effectively, yeah, that's the danger. Tenenbaum uses this analogy. AI is like an API, this powerful service you tap into, you milk it for results.
Okay.
But distributing that milk, packaging the AI's output into your specific product, that part is really hard to protect legally, especially with patents.
Why is that? I thought patents protected innovation.
Well, an idea itself isn't patentable. You need a novel and non-obvious process. And with AI, Tenenbaum argues, proving that is getting tougher and tougher. Plus, he mentions the cost like $70,000 or $80,000 just to start the process in the U.S.
Wow.
And it's often hard to pin down what's truly novel. Is it the underlying model? Usually not yours. Is it the training data? Hard to patent how you combine things. Maybe. But often not non-obvious enough. So it's expensive and difficult to get strong protection.
So you could spend years, millions, building an AI feature, and the company providing the base AI through an API could just see it works and roll out their own version.
That's a massive vulnerability, Tenenbaum points out. And it connects to his second reason why the old model is collapsing, the devaluation of talent.
Wait, talent is devalued? Surely you still need smart people.
You do. But Tenenbaum's point is that the need for big companies to acquire startups just for their people is going down.
How so?
Well, first, look around. Big tech companies are actually laying people off, right? They're optimizing. Second, and this is crucial, AI itself can do things that used to require highly skilled humans, like programming.
AI writing code.
Yeah. Tenenbaum suggests AI can write code, and even other AIs can review that code. So that old rationale, buying a company for its 2 geniuses and 10 elite programmers, it just doesn't hold the same weight if the core function can be done by the AI.
Okay, that's a big change. If your product can be copied easily and your team isn't the unique asset it once was, then the whole value proposition of a small tech startup looks shaky.
Shaky is a good word. And Tenenbaum uses some real-world examples to hammer this home.
Like you mentioned Tile versus Apple AirTags earlier.
That's a classic, yeah. Even before this latest AI surge, it shows the principle. Tile invented the category, right? Little trackers for your keys, your wallet.
Yeah, I had a few.
But then Apple launched AirTags. Was the tech massively better at first? Maybe not. But what did Apple have?
Their ecosystem.
Right.
Millions of iPhones already out there.
Exactly. A massive distribution. They could basically copy the functionality and push it instantly to a huge user base. Tile, the innovator, got sidelined. Tenenbaum says the key wasn't the tech difference, it was Apple's control over distribution.
And with AI, that replication can happen even faster, maybe by the AI provider themselves.
Precisely. Tenenbaum also talked about this concerning incident with Anthropic and Windsurf.
What happened there?
So Windsurf was a startup. They built their whole service relying heavily on Anthropic's AI, Claude, through its API.
Okay, like using AWS or Azure, but for the core AI brain.
Kind of, yeah. But Tenenbaum explains that when Anthropic started seeing Windsurf as maybe a competitor, or when Google was sniffing around possibly buying Windsurf, Anthropic just pulled the plug, cut off their API access.
Whoa, their entire business just vanished.
Essentially, overnight. Because the provider of their core tech decided they were a threat or there was a strategic conflict. It shows this incredible dependency. You're not just competing, you're totally reliant on your supplier not turning against you.
That's terrifying for a startup.
It is. And Tenenbaum says this isn't just theoretical. Microsoft, Meta, Amazon, they are actively building features, copying ideas, integrating things into their huge platforms all the time. He even mentioned WPP, the giant advertising group.
Yeah.
They invested loads in using AI for their services. But Tenenbaum's point is the big AI players, the Googles and Microsofts, they can often just build those same AI-powered advertising tools directly into their platforms, potentially cutting out players like WPP. The power is all concentrating down at that base AI layer.
Okay, so given all this,
Yeah.
this pretty dramatic shift Tenenbaum is describing, what's his takeaway for investors, people looking to put money into this space?
Well, his conclusion is pretty blunt. He basically says investing in small AI startups right now is probably a bad idea, or at best, an assured risk.
Assured risk, meaning likely to fail.
Unless that startup has incredibly strong, truly defensible IP that the big players absolutely cannot copy or work around.
Which, as you said, is getting harder and harder to secure with AI.
Exactly. So Tenenbaum thinks the capital de risco, the risk involved, is just way higher now. It makes it much less appealing for angel investors or VCs compared to, say, 5 or 10 years ago.
Because the exit strategy, getting bought or growing big enough to stand alone, is so much less certain.
That's the idea. Why would Google buy your small AI feature startup if they can just build it themselves in a month? And why buy your team if AI can do much of the work?
So where does the investment money go then?
He sees it converging, flowing towards the few massive companies that control the underlying AI technology, the big models, the cloud infrastructure. The value is shifting away from niche human expertise within a startup towards the raw capability of the AI itself, which is controlled by just a handful of players. It makes diversification really hard for investors, too.
This concentration of power in tech, in investment, it sounds like Tenenbaum sees this having much bigger ripple effects, beyond just startups.
Oh, absolutely. He argues these same forces are playing out globally. Think about competition between companies. He suggests that when AI can manage huge parts of a business, maybe even run it entirely in, say, 5 or 10 years.
Run the whole company.
Potentially. When that happens, the goal isn't just to beat company X in your market anymore. It becomes this relentless drive to, as he puts it, win everything you can. Much more aggressive, maybe.
A sort of AI-driven hypercapitalism.
Could be. And he draws a parallel to geopolitics. He believes AI capability, having it, controlling it, is becoming absolutely essential for countries to compete economically, technologically, maybe even militarily.
So nations without top-tier AI, they fall behind.
That's Tenenbaum's fear. He uses this really strong term, suggesting they risk becoming vassals to the dominant AI power, likely the U.S., in his view.
Vassals, like dependent states.
Yeah. He describes it as a geopolitical black hole. Other nations might want independence, but they might eventually have to align with the main AI power just to ensure their people can participate in the global economy to live well. He compares it to fusion in the sun, making it denser power consolidating. Hegemony accepted out of necessity.
Wow. That's quite a prediction. A consolidation of global power driven by AI. What about us, humans, in this picture? What's our role?
Tenenbaum sees our role shifting dramatically. From being the main actors, the drivers, we might become more like witnesses, spectators even.
Because AI is doing the work.
It's doing more and more of the knowledge work. Programming, analysis, even reviewing AI's own work. Many traditional roles just evaporate.
So it's not just about jobs, it's about our fundamental place.
That seems to be his implication. He makes a comparison to the internet. Remember life before the internet? You could live, sure, but could you work effectively? Could you really participate fully?
Not easily, no. Okay. It became essential.
Right. And Tenenbaum thinks AI will be the same. maybe even more so. You might technically survive without engaging deeply with AI, but working, participating in the economy, doing, as he says, absolutely anything else of consequence. Probably not possible. He even mentioned a friend who's using AI constantly now for work, personal stuff, and getting much better results. It just integrates itself.
That mention of personal use, how does Tenenbaum see AI changing human interaction itself?
It's an interesting point. He admits AI isn't great at deep personal relationships. Not yet, anyway. But interaction is changing. Think about AI voice assistants. They're getting incredibly natural, right? Mimicking accents, always trying to be helpful, pleasing. He calls them irresistible. But there's a flip side. The risk of filter bubbles gets amplified. AI might just show you exactly what it thinks you want to hear, limiting exposure to different views. And, he notes, interacting with AI lacks something fundamental to human relationships. Ego, which can be both good and bad, I suppose.
No arguments with an AI.
Right, but maybe less growth, too. And the speed of all this change. Tenenbaum really stresses that. It makes prediction incredibly hard.
Yeah, things feel like they're moving very fast.
And he brought up another potential social consequence. Boredom. Aburrimiento, he called it. If work has historically filled our days, given structure, fought off boredom, what happens when AI takes over a lot of that?
We get bored.
Maybe on a massive scale. He described it almost like a pandemic forever, but instead of being stuck at home, you're stuck without purpose, or at least traditional productive outlets. A strange kind of confinement.
Okay, this is a huge amount to process. From startup investing to global power, even boredom.
Yeah.
So, boiling it down, what's Tenenbaum's final piece of advice, especially for people listening who might be thinking about investing or starting something?
His advice is pretty direct, especially for investors. He says, think really, really hard before putting money into small companies today, particularly if they're heavily AI reliant. He basically calls it gambling.
Because the odds are stacked against them. High risk of being copied, lower value for the team.
Exactly. So his view, if you want to invest in tech, you're probably better off looking at the big established players, the ones controlling the core AI. Your chances are likely better there.
And for entrepreneurs, people thinking of starting a business.
Avoid businesses that AI can easily replicate. Simple as that. He jokingly but pointedly mentions plumbers. AI can't fix your leaky faucet yet. Find something AI can't easily touch. And his main point is urgency. Be aware of this shift now, before you waste time and money on an old model that just doesn't work anymore.
So, wrapping this up, based on Tenenbaum's insights from the material you shared, what this means for you, listening, is potentially profound. That classic image of the tech startup striking gold with a brilliant idea and talented team leading to a huge buyout, that era might be closing. Fast.
It seems Tenenbaum sees it being swallowed by AI's power to replicate and the dominance of the few companies controlling that core tech. It's not just about where VCs put their money. It's a fundamental change in how innovation happens, how value is created.
And how power is distributed, even between nations.
Right. It forces us to rethink a lot of assumptions.
Well, thank you for bringing this material in for the deep dive. It gives us, well, a lot to think about. A challenging but important perspective from Tenenbaum on where things might be heading.
Definitely a perspective worth considering in these times.
And maybe a final thought for you to mull over, sparked by Tenenbaum's more startling geopolitical ideas. If he's right, and the need for AI control really does push the world towards, say, a single dominant power or bloc, what does national independence even mean in that future? How do countries, or even individuals like us, find agency and compete when the keys to the kingdom are held by so few?
A really complex question. No easy answers there.
Something to ponder as this AI revolution continues to unfold. Until next time.